Figure it out.
Hello, this is Adam Koralik with Figure It Out Productions. The following video is part of our Quick Shoot series.
Hey guys, it's Adam here, and today I want to talk to you a bit about my predictions for the Nintendo Switch, where I think it's going to go, how well it might sell, etc., and possible trajectory for it. The TLDR version is, I'm concerned, and I don't know if it's actually going to do all that well. And goodbye if that's all you wanted to know. But if you want to actually explore the analysis of why I think that, then stick around. It's worth noting I already did an unboxing video with first impressions. That was like a fun-ass live stream for like 2 hours. That was great. And then I did like a hardware type of review where I analyze things I do and don't like about it from that perspective. So now, again, we're just going to focus on where I think it's going to go, which means we're essentially looking into the crystal ball. Obviously, everything I say, take with a grain of salt because it's just speculation based on what I think will happen. Maybe we'll look back on this in like a year, a couple years, whatever, and be like, wow, that guy fucked it up. He had no idea what he was talking about. Or, holy shit, that guy was on the money. That's happened many times on my channel. Thank you for that, for coming back, because there are people who do that. That's fucking cool. But yeah, so here are my predictions for the Switch. Brutal truth is, I don't think this thing is going to be that successful in the end. Now, why do I think that? Because when you look at it right now, you have to understand the console just came out, like a few days ago. And when you look at it, you go, well, why wouldn't it be successful? I've seen people post pictures of it everywhere. Everybody's buying it. Everybody's super excited, especially about Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild. Adam, you must be wrong, because I see people selling it and it's sold out everywhere, so you have no idea what you're talking about. Maybe, or maybe this is just because this is what Nintendo always fucking does in the last few years. Nintendo has a history now, in recent years, of deciding that the best way for them to move their products is to intentionally shortchange it to try and create demand. They're basically appealing to your primal instincts as a hunter, as a human being. What they're basically doing is they're looking at you and going, yeah, you can have one if you can find it, but good luck. Because if I were to tell you right now, all right, first of all, let's understand. I'm someone who's super passionate about gaming, which is why I'm just sitting here behind a table just talking about the concept of where I think a game console might or might not go, which is kind of a weird thing to be doing. What's even weirder, but thank you for doing it, is sitting there watching a guy talk about it. Now, what I mean by that is you and I are both super passionate about games enough to care enough to think about something like this. And that means you at least have a passing interest in this console. But if I were to tell you right now, hey, dude, you can go out right now. If you like it, you go out to Best Buy. They have them in stock. They're all over the place. Go get them. GameStop has it, Target, they all have them. Just go out and get it. You might be like, well, I don't know. Maybe later when it gets like a discount or something. I don't, you know, it's not that, I'll worry about it later. But if I were to sit here and be like, don't worry, you can't get one. Even if you wanted to, dude, you're fucked. You couldn't possibly find one. I have one. I'm smarter than you. I got one. You can't have one because you didn't think ahead like me. Essentially, that's Nintendo's attitude. I'm not saying that about any of you. But that's essentially Nintendo's attitude by intentionally shortchanging people. What is your primal reaction to that? Fuck you. I'll prove you wrong. I'm going to go out and try and find one. Which means if you actually do that or think that, there is a part of you that would actually purchase it if you found it. And that's what they're banking on. Continuing to create essentially false demand in order to move units. Nintendo has proven over the last couple of years that that's really their model, with things like Amiibos, where they would intentionally shortchange it to drive up demand, and the NES Classic. And it seems likely right here in the first burst of sales that that's what they're doing. Now, why would they be doing that? Well, let's analyze how we got here with this console by looking at the last two generations of Nintendo hardware. Of course, the Wii and the Wii U. Now first, you need to understand with the Wii, Nintendo decided to appeal... Actually, we're going to go back slightly further. We're going to go back to the GameCube. People forget the GameCube, Nintendo tried to directly compete head-to-head with the other people in their competition. You know, Sony with PlayStation 2, Microsoft with the original Xbox, and to a lesser extent, SEGA with their Dreamcast. And it didn't really work out for them. They came in third out of fourth place. They actually lost to the original Xbox, which was Microsoft's first console. And people also forget, at that point in time, Nintendo wasn't doing well. There was a lot of chatter that Nintendo was just going to do what Sega did, which was bail on hardware and make third-party software. So Nintendo needed to do something. and they thought, okay, the gamers really weren't there for us with the GameCube. The casuals really weren't there for us with the GameCube. The best they did with was like kids. So they kind of went, okay, what we're going to do is try to appeal to a different market. We're going to focus on just the casuals, and we're going to essentially resell you the GameCube, which is what the Wii was. It was the GameCube on steroids, but it was marketed totally differently. It had its magical wands that were like interesting to people, and it focused entirely on, again, what I'm calling casuals, meaning not you, not me. And I'm not saying this just to shit on the Wii, even though I fucking hated that console. I'm saying so you understand this through historical context. And I'll give you another example that's not video game related to make this clearer to you. Think about shoes, all right? I buy one fucking pair of shoes like every 4 or 5 years. I buy Jordan brand shoes. You know why I picked Jordan brand? I live in Chicago. I get black ones because I like black. Okay, that's the extent of it. But, and I'll bet you're probably very similar. You probably own shoes, right? You know, it'd be weird if you didn't, but you own a fucking computer or a phone or whatever you're watching this on, but you don't own shoes. You own shoes. But I bet you're not super passionate about shoes. You might be one of the rare ones who actually is crossed over. But point is, you own shoes, and most people own shoes. But did you know there are shoe collectors? There are people who are super passionate about shoes. I think the term is sneakerhead. People who go out and wait in lines for new releases of shoes. They pre-order shoes. They buy fuck tons of pairs of shoes they have no intention of ever wearing. Shoes they get just because it's like, you know, the new... I'm so not knowledgeable on that subject that I can't even really articulate it all that well. All I know is that there's a point that there are tons and tons of different variations of shoes. People who make, there's YouTube videos, people who make top 10s of shoes, top 10 worst of shoes, etc., etc. I'm not saying this to mock anyone who's into shoes. My point is to relate the material. Because I'm sure to an extent that sounds ridiculous to you. But put it into the proper context. We do the same fucking thing with video games. We really care about video games, even though to someone like that, that's ridiculous. It's someone who only cares about shoes, and you're like, why did you buy Zelda for this new Nintendo when you also have it on the old Nintendo, referring to the Wii U? I don't know, because I wanted to. That's just how I felt. But I'll bet you at the same time when it comes to shoes, Nike, Jordan brand, Adidas, which is how it's actually pronounced, those companies see way the fuck more money out of the 90% of non-passionate shoe purchasers, buyers, customers, what have you, than they do the sneakerheads. They want the sneakerheads for the marketing, they want the sneakerheads for excitement, to keep their brands like cool and relevant and all that stuff, but at the end of the day, they're making more money from guys like me who go out and buy a pair of shoes every few years because the vast, vast, vast majority of us are that way. Unfortunately, or fortunately, depending on how you look at it, that's how it is with video games. 90% of people who buy video games are not like us. They would never watch something like this. They would never make a video like this. That would never happen, but they still buy video games. So with the Wii, Nintendo wanted to approach that market. The mistake they made is they solely focused on that market and told the rest of us, you guys go take your PlayStation 3, you go take your Xbox 360, we don't care, you go have that, we're going to focus over here. It gave them very short-term success that, I mean, the Wii was a moneymaker, don't get me wrong, it printed cash, it sold over 100 million units, it was a ridiculous financial success. But it did alienate their audience, us. We kind of went, fuck you. Because now, you look at the Wii, it's Goodwill's favorite console, it's there all the time, and its legacy is mostly shovelware, combined with a few games that gamers actually give a shit about. And the vast majority of you who'd be like, no, the Wii was great, I will bet the next line out of your mouth is, yeah, especially once you mod it, then it can do all this great shit. That's not something Nintendo gave you. That's something modders gave you. Just so that's out there. So anyway, Nintendo goes, alright, let's move on to the Wii U. We'll make this more advanced console, etc., and we'll bring our casual audience with us. Nope. The casual audience can't do that. They liked the gimmick of the magic wand, but they moved the fuck on after that. They didn't care about your tablet machine. And that's why the Wii U had a really bad launch. It had burned its bridge with the gaming community, and it had it didn't have the built-in fan base that they thought they would have. Which is part of the reason they even kept that name, Wii U. That was a terrible fucking name for such an ultimately great video game console. That's the irony in all of that. At a certain point, Nintendo realized, yeah, this isn't going to work. We need to fix this. We need to move on. which is why about 2 years ago we started hearing things about Codename NX, aka the Switch. So Nintendo I made a video a few years ago where I said repeatedly what they needed to do was to use the Wii as a sacrificial device to kind of, you know, restore their brand and get some good faith back with the community. And they did that. Not exactly the way I said, but they did do it in the form of basically making really good games where people like me are sitting here being like, fucking buy a Wii U, it's awesome. I know nobody else has it, I know it's not successful, but this game is the shit and you can only play it here. It's great, it's my favorite console in this generation. And a lot of people were doing that in the gaming community. And it helped restore some of their faith, which is why we are now where we are with the Switch. Where the gaming community is trusting Nintendo a little more, but is the casual audience there? Basically now with the Switch, they've kind of attempted to take the best of both worlds by being like, this is going to be a gaming-centric console where we focus a lot on our games. It's going to be like have a lot of solid stuff that you guys are really going to like, but at the same time, we're going to market it wider. We're going to show everyone that the Switch is a good thing. Whereas with the Wii U, they thought, oh, we'll advertise it in Pottery Barn and shit like that, where they thought the casual audience would be, and they didn't bother to advertise it to us, etc., etc. So that all sounds like a recipe for success, right? Especially when you take in other factors. Let's look at the reality that basically Nintendo must have looked at their console division and their handheld division and went, look, the console division is not doing that well, especially with the Wii U. But the handheld division, with the exception of the Virtual Boy, has always been successful, while the console division is like 50-50. What I mean by that is the NES, the SNES, and the Wii were all really financially successful, sold a shit ton of units. But you look at the other consoles, the N64, the GameCube, and the Wii U, believe it or not, especially with the N64 and the GameCube, I'm sure you think, no, those consoles were really popular, I loved them. They both lost their generations pretty handedly. And the Wii U got absolutely demolished. So they're basically 50-50. So the Switch is the 7th one, and it's going to be the decider, possibly. So they basically said, you look at the handhelds, again, with the exception of the Virtual Boy, they've always killed it. And so they were like, well, what if we appeal to both? What if we make a handheld for the people who want handhelds? And what if we make a console for people who want consoles? And then everybody has literally, they can switch, they can choose, they can pick whatever they want. Will that work? I don't think it will. And the first thing that comes into my mind when it comes to that is a story that my buddy Shane, Rerez TV, he's told this story in a video of his, and I'm going to quickly summarize it. He had the Switch 2 weeks early, and he had Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild 2 weeks early. So imagine that. He's got a console 2 weeks of the next console out, this big popular thing, supposedly, that people really want. And he's got potentially the game of the year sitting here. And he goes out and he says, I'm going to go out in public and play it and see who calls me out, because somebody's gonna, people are gonna notice I have this new console that no one else has, and I have the most anticipated game of the year no one has. I'm gonna play it in public and get swamped. And that's basically what he was expecting to have happen. Nobody interacted with him, not at all. Nobody gave a shit. That's a bad sign. When he had this early and nobody gave a fuck, and that's all casuals. They were all, as he described it, everyone was busy with their own shit, on their phone and stuff like that. Now, I'm not saying the console's going to fail on the basis of that one story, but it does give you a sense that maybe that buzz isn't there outside of the gaming community. Maybe it's only the gaming community that cares. But yeah, so we'll see. But if you focus on it as a console or focus on it as a handheld, it unfortunately runs into several quirks, which I talked more about in my hardware video. But the short version of that is basically, as a handheld, it really doesn't work all that well because it suffers from two key flaws, which is that it has poor battery life and that it's rather big for something considered portable. Like, it's small for a console, yes, but this does not fit in your pocket. Unless you take the Joy-Cons off, and then you have to put it in one pocket, put the Joy-Cons in another, in addition to all the other stuff you may have on you, like, your phone, which you're probably going to use portably instead. So I don't know, man. I don't think it really works on that level. And then when it comes to being a console, it's obviously a very strange console to try and use. So while I think Nintendo's attempt was to appeal to everyone, they might ultimately appeal to no one. Because people who want this thing as a handheld look at it and go, $300 for a handheld with poor battery life and that's kind of big, not really what I want. And people who look at it as a console go, yeah, it's significantly underpowered compared to the competitors. and it probably isn't going to get much third-party support. I don't know if I really want this thing as a console. Unfortunately, I think that's more likely to be the way it plays out. And so now we got to focus a little bit more on the game library. Again, we're all kind of in the it just came out high, because we're all gamers and we care about Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild, which is pretty much single-handedly the reason everybody's excited about it. But like, once the dust settles, let's remember this. When this console came out, it had 5 games at launch. 2 of them were by Nintendo, which one of them was, of course, Legend of Zelda. The other was 1-2 Switch, a game that really should have been a free pack-in. One, oddly enough, by Konami, which was Super Bomberman, which is actually pretty cool. But then the other 2, fucking Skylanders whatever by Activision, and Just Dance 2017 by Ubisoft. That's it, at least as far as physical content goes. Now, what are those 2? I don't have those games, but what do the 2 of them have in common? They're games that exist on fucking everything else. They're both on the Xbox One, they're both on the PS4, the Xbox 360, the PS3, the Wii U, and in Just Dance 2017's case, it's also on the original Wii, which, as weird as it is to think about, the original Wii is the grandfather of this console. Wow. The point I'm making is those games are obviously easy to port to multiple devices, and they're not games that are going to move units. They're just kind of extra games. So what that essentially tells you is Nintendo supported the machine themselves with one legitimate title. To their credit, Konami actually put something interesting on there. Ubisoft just kind of threw out an easy one, and Activision threw out an easy one. Now, we know there's more games coming, that's true, but we also know at the same time a lot of developers are kind of like, I don't know if I want to touch the Switch. Basically, they're in the position of like, look, if it's successful, we'll support it. But if it's not, we're not interested. But at the same time, that's a vicious cycle because it won't necessarily be successful without a lot of third-party support. And this is the part where I have to unfortunately say a little bit of doom and gloom through history here. So I want to analyze those last 3 consoles like I just talked about, including the Switch, and compare them to another console manufacturer throughout history. And I know where people will think I'm going with this, but give me a second. It's not what you think. The obvious comparison is SEGA. So I would compare the Wii kind of like to the Genesis CD, Sega CD 32X combo, like as an all-in-one deal. Wildly successful, even though I consider the Genesis a high-quality console, I do not consider the Wii a high-quality console, but they were both rather successful, and they made developers excited. But in both cases, they ended up burning their audience, because in Sega's case, the 32X and Sega CD really started to piss people off, and the Wii started to piss people off when they realized it really wasn't all that good, and it was just mostly a gimmick, etc. But developers said, look, you made us money, so we're going to support you in the next round. You get to the Saturn, and you get to the Wii U. What do those both have in common? They had a lot of third-party support, but nobody was buying them. In the end, they had relatively small game libraries. Here's something that might blow your mind. There are more Sega Saturn games in North America alone than there are for the Wii U in all regions combined. Wow. Again, that's physical media, though. So anyway, but in both cases, they pissed off developers, and developers left. Like 2K, for example, put out NBA 2K13 at the launch of the Wii U and never put out another damn game for the console. And I know they didn't get rid of their development kits. I've been to 2K's headquarters. I've actually seen their Wii U development kits, and there's a lot of dust on them. Whereas EA, in both cases, literally in both cases, the Sega Saturn and the Wii U, was essentially annoyed by sales so much they decided not to support them anymore. In the case of EA with the Saturn, they said, fuck it, we're not going to touch the Dreamcast, we want nothing to do with Sega. In the case of the Switch, or sorry, Nintendo in general, they made 4 games. Most, I think all were launch titles. Madden 13, FIFA 13, Need for Speed something or other, and then Mass Effect 3. Those are the 4 games that EA put out on the Wii U. They did so badly that EA just dropped them completely. Now, supposedly EA is going to be working with the Switch, at least they're testing it with like a FIFA game. But that's not a really big commitment. And the same thing is with 2K. They're testing it with NBA 2K18. Nintendo was at least able to get them to do that. To take 2 games that are easily ported to multiple consoles and will already be on a bunch of other things. That's the extent of it. And they couldn't get them, either of them, to line them up for the launch. Now granted, that's because they're usually going to launch in the fall, but like, what was stopping EA from bringing last year's Madden to this thing? I don't know. They just didn't want to do it, because neither of them trust it. And that scares me, because what I'm essentially telling you is, the Wii U, when you really think about it, had a stronger launch lineup than the Switch. And I know what you're thinking, but no, fucking Zelda! While I agree that this is basically the game that's fucking blinding all of us, it's the game that's making us think, no. This is strong because of this game. Yes, this game is singularly stronger than any individual title that the Wii U had. I don't dispute that. I mean, at launch, for sure. I don't dispute that. But think about variety as far as number of developers who are interested. That's not a good sign. And I don't know, man, I'm scared that Nintendo is probably not really going to be... Who the fuck is going to buy a Switch to play FIFA? Let's keep it real. If you are going to buy FIFA for the Switch, it's because you already own a fucking Switch. Same goes with NBA 2K18, etc. And those are just two developers. There's a lot of developers who are really on the fence with the Switch. We will see. Obviously, I'm hoping for success with this thing. I want it to be wildly popular. I just don't see it happening. But I will say this.
There is hope, though. Nintendo has made it easier for independent developers to go ahead and make games for their platforms. We saw it a lot later in the Wii U, and we're seeing it now in the Switch, particularly with the eShop and what we can expect to be coming to the platform. If they make it easy for indies to make physical releases, the Switch could actually end up going down in history as one of like the greatest indie game consoles of all time, with a very unique library, especially physically, in addition, of course, to Nintendo's IPs. Game predictions-wise, I would assume we're going to see a lot of the Wii U's greatest hits, things like Mario Kart 8, of course, coming, but don't be surprised if there's more, like Smash Brothers and other things. I also think at some point in the future they're going to add like YouTube and Netflix support, just to give this thing more variety. I assume it'll get cracked at some point because I think it's using some iteration of Android. That's what it seems to be doing. And so therefore it's not going to take long before someone breaks that.
If the Switch is successful, I guarantee it annoys the fuck out of all of us. And what I mean by that is, once again, let's look down memory lane at Nintendo's hardware history. The NES, the SNES, and the Wii, as mentioned before, the three most successful consoles Nintendo's ever done. What's the other thing they all have in common? I'll give you a second. They all had slim models, or refresh models, Model 2, whatever you think about it. The NES had the top loader, the SNES had the Junior, the Wii had the Wii Mini. You look at Nintendo's three most least successful consoles, the N64, the GameCube, and the Wii U. Nope. They just stuck with the same hardware the whole time until they basically could get rid of it and move on. And no, the Panasonic GameCube doesn't count. Panasonic made it, Nintendo did not. So the Switch is kind of in the same position, where if it's successful, I'll pretty much guarantee you they make upgraded versions of it, where if it's not, they'll probably sit with it. Need more evidence? Let's look at their handheld line. Let's look at that as if you instantly know what I'm saying. Every single one of their handhelds, with the exception of, oh, I don't know, the one failure, the Virtual Boy, had multiple iterations. Game Boy had Game Boy, and then Game Boy Pocket, Game Boy Light, eventually Game Boy Color, Game Boy Advance, Game Boy Advance SP, SP Plus, SDSi, DS Lite, DS XL, 3DS, 3DS XL, 2DS, new 3DS. Oh, but wait a minute, there was only one Virtual Boy. They never made a slim model of that. I wonder why. You kind of see what I'm saying here? So if the Switch is successful, it would not surprise me if in a year from now we see one that's, oh, I don't know, suddenly it has better battery life. That's really weird. Oh, and the screen, it's smaller, so it fits in your pocket better. Or, what do you know, it's one of those clamshell deals so that it's more portable. Or it has a better dock where it actually fits in the dock all the way. You see what I'm saying? Don't be surprised if we have Switch 2.0 in a couple of years. And now that the model of the industry is changing with things like PS4 Pro and Xbox Scorpio, etc., there's no longer really a reason Nintendo can't socially get away with. I think this thing, I could be wrong, but I think this thing uses NVIDIA's Tegra chip. What's to stop them from putting the Tegra 2 or maybe a future Tegra 3 in there to get more advanced capabilities? Nothing. Especially if it's successful. There's nothing stopping them from doing that. So that's basically my prediction. If it's successful, it'll annoy the fuck out of all of us. And if it's not successful, it'll probably actually be a pretty good game console that's very hard supported by Nintendo, but probably by no one else. And we'll probably really like it, but this is where we have to get to that part. How does it compare to the Dreamcast? Because logically, that's what follows in that analysis. Well, let's understand that SEGA was pretty much out of the game before they even made the Dreamcast. That was what made that work is an entirely different story that I've told in my Dreamcast recap video. Essentially, it was a wealthy billionaire who gave away all of his money to make it happen. Totally different story. Nintendo is not in a financially hurt position. But with the change of the industry, and with the potential success of or failure of essentially Third Strike, you're out. Again, I know the Wii made money, but it really hurt them socially. Wii U fails, if the Switch fails, Nintendo won't necessarily go to business, I'm not saying that, but they might start moving in other directions. I think they were testing the waters a lot with Super Mario Run, and I know they didn't make Pokemon Go, but they had a hand in it. I think they're doing a Fire Emblem game now for mobile devices. I think they're trying to see what they can get away with and where they'll be successful. There might be a plan where they just try to integrate themselves into other devices. Not necessarily saying you're going to go out and find Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild for your PS4. I'm not saying that. But they might have like a Nintendo eShop app that exists on other things, or something like that. Whereas I still think, and people give me shit for it, but this is still what I think. I think Sony will probably do something very similar, where they create PlayStation Now as some sort of, maybe a little box, and like a Roku type of box that is essentially a streaming service. Or Microsoft seems very, I wouldn't say super clear, but they seem pretty intent on eventually getting away from hardware. Yes, they're giving us the Scorpio, but it seems like something that they're doing just to kind of go out with a bang. I mean, don't forget, they announced that Xbox Game Pass thing recently. It's like the Netflix of video games for them. So it seems like the whole industry might be going in that way, and in a sense, Nintendo is a relic. You know, and don't get me wrong, I love this stuff. I love new consoles. I love hardware. I don't want them going anywhere. But it wouldn't surprise me if they have no choice. Even if the Switch is successful, they may not have a choice. The industry may no longer support them. They may be the non-evil GameStop of their own industry. GameStop, you know, the whole business model is predicated on selling used games and stuff. Well, if there's no more physical media, then that hurts them, which is like when their stocks tanked when that Xbox Pass thing was announced. Even if Nintendo is successful with this, there may simply no longer be a place for home consoles in the future. It's hard to say, because we are now essentially, we had one console, the Wii U specifically, that proved Nintendo's IPs are simply not enough to carry a whole console. There needs to be more to it. The Switch is hoping to do that by appealing to both the handheld and the console market. Can it do it? I legitimately don't know. But my guess, no, it can't do that. That's my guess. So there you go, guys. I hope that was in some way insightful. If you disagree with me, please share. I'd love to get other people's opinions. Obviously, I don't fucking know. I'm not from the future. But let's see. We will find out in a few years how right or wrong I was. Thank you very much for watching. I'll see you all later.